Hello, welcome back to Road to Global IGL. This is going to be the second video out of the three-part series about how to approach a new map as a new team. This video is going to be about forming a default and how you can use defaults to improve your game through preparation. First of all, I'm just going to go over what a default is going to achieve for your team. So each round, a default is going to give you a certain amount of map control, also information about what's going on with the enemy team, and potentially some picks through which you'll be able to devolve the round into a mid-round scenario. A default is an open approach to a round, where you establish map control and attempt to punish CT aggression. The default will normally give a level of stability and consistency to how your rounds are going to play out. You need to have an idea about what you want to do in a map, and this is going to be based off your philosophy. As your defaults will be your fallback, you really want each one to achieve a piece of map control that you consider important in your philosophy. You'll generally find some gunfights while you're looking for this map control, so you may find some advantages in that way, but the focus on map control is going to ensure that your default is effective regardless of whether those fights come or not. You can choose to play your defaults more passively in order to gain information off which you can make an informed mid-round call. For example, if you find a number of players stacked towards the A site, then you're able to transition into fast pressure onto B and see if you can find space over there. It's in general somewhat difficult to consistently make a good mid-round call before either team has lost members, since they can generally rotate players and also delay with utility or whatnot. So it's the information game is kind of like a back and forth to begin with. It's not incredibly round winning most of the time. You can have different defaults which achieve different things, i.e. different pieces of map control. For example, on Overpass, I'll have a default where we send multiple players towards A to take control of this playground area. And we'll have 3 or so players around here, maybe 1 here, and 2 guys going up here, and 1 guy back con and 1 guy towards B. Or a different default where we only have 1 player up towards A, and we send numbers through monster or through this area into short water so that we can gain this map control. These are still, if you notice, both based on pieces of map control, but they give different looks to what you're doing and also allow you to play differently against what your opponent's doing, and see, it lets you have a bit more variability in what you're doing, because sometimes things just don't work. And also, if you play different ways, then you're able to force reactions at different times. So for example, if you come short water 3 rounds in a row, then they're going to start fighting hard for short water or trying to throw util, and you can get them to waste that utility quite easily. You're going to need to make sure that you're utilizing your players correctly when you're doing these defaults. So this is one of the main things that's important to work out. Your players, first of all, have to be comfortable in the positions that they're playing, and they also have to be able to have their own individual liberty, so they have to be comfortable with the plays that they're making. You kind of need to find a balance between reining in your players and letting them improvise and make individual plays. This is because if they're too reined in, then they're going to be uncomfortable in what they're doing and underutilized. And if you let them have too much individual freedom from round to round, then you potentially risk the structure of your team and the default in each round, and that will reduce the effectiveness of your default over a longer time scale. The balance is going to be different for each team. It's really about finding what works for you and for your set of players. Don't expect to get it right first time either. It's really just a good thing to talk to people about. Try out maybe a stricter default or a more passive default and seeing what works, and try and make sure that different players can be used in different amounts. So if you have some flashy players who are making good plays, then you can let them have a bit more freedom and then base the rest of your team in an organized fashion around what they're doing. One side note for that is that you kind of want to make sure they're communicating whatever they're doing whenever they're doing this stuff, so that you can play around them effectively, because players can make individual plays, but it's best that you react off of those individual players as a team, and that works better if you can get them to communicate what they're doing so that you can understand how best to play around them. So you're going to have to choose how you want to use defaults. Some teams are going to be more default heavy, so they're going to be playing a lot of default rounds from the start, and they're going to be a bit looser, so it gives individual players a bit of room to make the switch ups that are necessary to beat teams. Whereas default teams that use defaults less are going to be using set plays intermingled with their defaults to try and catch off the enemy team and play around them. Default heavy teams, because they have their individual variability, kind of risk getting punished by aggressive CT pushes because you're not always giving them the same defense to play against. So your defense is you're not going to know what your defense is against every push in a given round. Whereas if you practice it yourself, then you'll know how good your defense for a given default is going to be against a given CT push if you practice long enough. For example, if I do my short water default, I know that them pushing A is going to be a bad idea, but because I'm going to lose this area. But if I have 3 guys up in A and I'm doing the separate default, if they push up A and push up long, then I'm going to have a decent chance of dealing with it and being able to profit from it. If you're having a round where you have random number of people going certain ways and this guy might be going fast out long, you have no idea how well it's going to go with the long push because there's more variability and you haven't seen that scenario necessarily before. So teams that use defaults less are going to, like I said, they're going to be more adept at dealing with those pushes, but another advantage that they'll have is that they're going to be able to intermingle their default rounds with set play rounds where they're going to be doing something out of spawn. This is going to be able to abuse the conditioning that they've put onto the enemy team while doing their defaults, and it allows you to profit more from the preparation that you make and gain strategic advantages over your opponents because you can force them into doing certain things to deal with your defaults. And once they're doing these things, for example, mollying monster at the start of the round or not mollying monster at the start of the round, you can start doing rounds where if they stop mollying because you never go out monster, you can do a fast B rush and then able to do that. If they keep mollying short and using all their util on B early, then you can do a late B pot. It's something like this, but when you have this conditioning that is consistent, they're going to start doing things that you can predict, and then you can base your strats off of those, and it's going to give you more consistent results than using a random strat in a given round, where you don't know necessarily what the CTs are going to do. Personally, I'd recommend making organized defaults and then improvising with calls in the mid-round, so that you're able to benefit from being able to make organized pushes while also dealing with enemy aggression consistently at the start of the round. And it sets you up to play each round the way that you want to, as you're not at a player disadvantage in the first 20 seconds, which is, I find, the hardest time to maintain that advantage when you're trying to call as an IGL. There's like nothing worse than just having 1 or 2 players die at the start of the round and then you just lose a gun round straight off of that, when the peaks that they were taking are potentially less than 50-50s or not peaks that you want them to be taking. So you just kind of lose a round out of that. Yeah, so defaults are really one of the best places to start in your preparation, as once you have a good consistent default, you're going to be able to start building more technical strats and set plays on top of it with more consistent results. This is because your default will form a basis for how your rounds play out, and from that basis of map control and average pick/gunfights, you'll be able to start developing strats that work for you in those situations around 1 minute 30 once the status quo has been established. To summarize, defaults help you play Team CS in 2 main ways. It's going to make the status quo at 130 more consistent so you can base your strats off of that. And it also allows you to do strats out of spawn based on conditioning that will be able to work more consistently because you know what the CTs are going to be doing on a given time. On top of this, you'll also get the chance to perfect the first 20 seconds of the round with increased preparation so that you'll be able to set your team up for success through that good preparation. Alright, that's pretty much it. The next video is going to be on forming protocols, which fit quite nicely into defaults, but if you can get the default stuff down, then protocols will come quite nicely afterwards. Alright, that's been me, and that's been another episode of Road to Global. Thank you very much. Goodbye.